Howdy, all of you delicious people. I'm here today to review Van Helsing from 2004. So, this, of course, is the Hugh Jackman Van Helsing, and a lot of you may not know there actually is a animated movie with Van Helsing that is to be like the London assignment that came out right around the same time. Man, did they had a lot of hope for this movie. Like they went on and they did like action figures for it. Like I had my parents go on and get me action figures for this. I'm like, why? But they're like, well, hey, it's a movie. It came out, and I'm like, it's like this movie is probably not going to have any value whatsoever. But it was like, let's just buy these, and like come to find out, like there's quite a bit of action figures that don't really have much value. But anyways, it is what it is. So Van Helsing. So for those of you who don't know, also there actually is a character called Solomon Kane. Looks just like Van Helsing. Very similar looks and all, and he is to be a Marvel comic book character, but I think at the time when they did this movie, like he wasn't to be sold that, like, but he's a Marvel comic book character technically. Go on and check out Solomon Kane. It's actually a really surprisingly good movie, and I liked it. You can also probably check out, I would recommend Monster Squad as well as this movie, because Monster Squad feels very similar, having a bunch of young kids want to go on and try to take down some legendary monsters. But yeah, so like this movie easily won me over because I just thoroughly enjoy supernatural characters. Definitely a thumbs up. I think that this is like a good movie, even though the effects don't hold up. Just because I like this kind of Hugh Jackman character where he gives no Fs, and like the story is just kind of good enough because I've seen worse supernatural movies. And plus, also a lot of people will go on and like kind of get like Hellboy vibes from this movie, or will also go on and get some like I Frankenstein vibes from this movie also. But so yeah, so fun movie. I enjoy it. Uh, Van Helsing teed up. What is this movie about? Where can you go on and see it? Currently available at Stars right now. By and large, I tend to go on and watch a lot of Stars content, anyways. So I go on and consistently like just give a gander of what's on there. And so I saw like Van Helsing's in there. I'm like, well, of course I'm going to watch this movie. I thoroughly needed a reason to watch this movie, and boom, there it was. And so I was like, yeah, I'm going to watch this film. So, so Van Helsing. So teeing it up, what is this movie about? We have Van Helsing, who is to have no past memory of the life of which that he is to have led. At some points, he gets some fragments about being in Rome at some point, or to like kind of just get some dreams and stuff like that, but he doesn't really know who he is. And so Helsing goes on, is working with the Vatican to try to take down all these monsters, and he is to become just as much an outlaw as the monsters he is to fight, which I thought was really kind of cool. To go on and have a number of people think that Van Helsing is to murder people, and to think that he is some murderer, some monster, and whatever, and like it's actually just the opposite. He's trying to kill one to save 1,000, and people don't realize that. So we have Helsing that is to go up against Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in this film, the werewolf, Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, even though mostly Frankenstein's monster mostly teams up with Van Helsing in this movie. Also, I would recommend people possibly checking out the animated anime called Helsing. That isn't the same thing, but it's similar. But it's just really like a fun anime um, that I just like enjoyed. It has some visually interesting things about it. So yeah. So with that said, I think that's all that I wanted. There was a lot of having me to say a lot of stuff. I apologize, but there's a lot of in there. If you do not have the availability to go into stars, I can by and large tell you a number of places that you can go on and hopefully be able to see this free. Uh, Really, I would say for a lot of people, if you have a phone, you could probably go through and search the word movie apps. And more than likely, you can find quite a bit of like bootleg movie apps that can maybe be able to find Van Helsing for absolutely free. Or, I would have people go onto a Google search the word Letter C Movies app, and hopefully be able to find an app you can download. You can also go through, uh, hopefully, Google search the word Fox HD movies. Regardless of what I see next, search for that. And so you can go on and find an app where a logo will say Fox HD movies, and this is through like a tablet or phone. This is what I would recommend doing. And you can also find that the logo will say Fox HD movies, but a title will say something different. It will say Play 1080p HD movies. You can also go on a Google Play Store, and I don't think that Helsing is available on this app. But like, regardless, if you can't find this movie, you can go on and find a number of other things for absolutely free. So here's why I'm recommending this. You can go onto a Google Play Store and search the word TV Crush. This is 2 words. And you'll find an app where it has a logo that says HD Movies, and there'll be like a king crown off to the side of all in this app. You can download it and be able to see a plethora of movies for free. Stuff like maybe Spider-Man Far From Home or something like that, or No Way Home, or whichever. Any number of those things you could probably be able to see for free. You'll be able to see ads, but anyways, pushing on. So now let's just get into the spoilers of this. Let's go into that double 5 time territory, because it's about that time to just, as always, go into spoiler time. Spoiler time, it's about the time you're going to spoil this movie. So in the very beginning of it, we of course have a black and white beginning of this movie, which I really do appreciate. So we of course have at Victor's Frankenstein's castle, we have this lynch mob that is to try to bash their way through this door using a tree trunk of sorts, and is trying to get into Victor's place. And so Victor is to go on and try to resurrect his monster, his Frankenstein's monster, who eventually, once we get into the part where we're explaining Frankenstein, I'll just say Frankenstein instead of Frankenstein's monster. It's just too long of a stretch of a thing to say. So you would have thought they would have just gone on at some point and just justified like, hey, like, just call him Frank, or just call him like Frankenstein. Like, it doesn't have to be like Frankenstein's monster, but that's always what they like more and more in the later years say, like, oh, he's Frankenstein's monster. You have to say the whole thing. Like, no. So pushing on. Victor is to be teaming up with Dracula to resurrect the monster here. And once Victor is to go on and resurrect this character, and we start have this Frankenstein just kind of moving within this table alive, we have Dracula's like, oh my god, Victor, you have figured out how to go on and resurrect this. I'm paraphrasing here. And so Dracula's like, well, I'm going to go on and use your monster to resurrect my children. And Victor, of course, is to want to go on and refuse Dracula going on and doing that, because that's far too evil a deed for him to go on and do. And like, Victor just won't allow it, to the point of Victor bringing a sword to Dracula, and Dracula is like, really? Like, dude, I'm already dead. And like Victor is desperately asking Igor for his help, and Igor is like, "Well, I'm sorry, Victor. It's like you did take me into your home, but Dracula's my employer, so no, I'm not going to help you." So Victor is to have a sword to Dracula, and Dracula just walks right up to the sword, stabs himself in the chest all the way through, and so Dracula goes on and is to drain Victor, and so while Victor is being drained, Victor is to desperately try to unpull out this sword from Dracula and is to try to swing at him, but then he drops the sword and he dies. So we have it where Dracula is to kind of look on at the villagers and just kind of be distracted for a moment. And we have it where Frankenstein is to grab Victor because Frankenstein has gotten out of his chains and is to take Victor off to go to this windmill house. And the lynch mob with pitchforks and torches in hand is chasing after them. So they are calling Frankenstein a monster, and he's like, "I'm not a monster." As we have this guy just kind of whining and crying and complaining through most of this movie. How dare you? Anyways, so this windmill house is to be burnt down, and so while that's happening, we seem to have it to where both Victor and both Monster are to eventually fall down this hole, and eventually they do survive, but the whole entire time they're living like Frankenstein's monster is living down by this hole just trying to survive. So we have it, of course, where Dracula is very upset that Frankenstein was to get away and that he is probably to miss out on his once in a lifetime opportunity because now Victor Frankenstein is dead to resurrect his children. So they have to come up with some alternate plan. So transition us to now be in Paris. So Paris. We have it where Helsing is going on, Hugh Jackman, Van Helsing here, is chasing after Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. So, because of course if people do not know, because they also go on and explain this in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, so this is kind of like the same kind of approach to Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in this movie as it also is in League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. If you've never seen that movie, check it out. It's actually a decent film. Like, we get some interesting characters like Dorian Gray and who's immortal, and Sean Connery that's being Quatermain and this and that. It's a very good film. I enjoy it. Like, I honestly wish that they would go on and reboot that kind of thing, but just put together just a much more, like, there's something about like the story of the movie that just isn't quite enough. But like, it probably has gone on to have like a cult classic. It seems that people are really enthralled about that film. So great, because I enjoy that also. Pushing on. So it seems that Van Helsing is to catch Hyde a little bit too late because he is to go on and kill a woman and is to leave a calling card, which is a big, massive cigar the size of a Twinkie, it seems. So it's like pretty big. It's a pretty big cigar, like kind of reminding me of those like Wolverine days where he's chewing on that cheap cigar. So Helsing is chasing after Hyde here, and so when he is to go on to this church and meet Hyde within this clock tower, we of course have Helsing, who is to be working with the Vatican and all those folks. So Helsing is to tell like Dr. Jekyll, and he's like, "Well, hey, I'm Hyde now. I'm Mr. Hyde now." And he's like, "Oh, okay, Hyde, sure." So he's plopping out his laundry list of crimes, mentioning that he is to go on and kill a plethora of men, women, children, and I guess some poultry. So we have Helsing, who's supposed to be like more discreet about this, and instead of killing Hyde, he is to try to bring him in for them to possibly be able to like retract Dr. Jekyll from the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde equation, because they of course are to want to find out like, hey, how did this guy do this? How did this guy put this together? And Helsing is just like, well, they want that. I don't really care. Like, I could immediately just kind of shoot first and ask questions never, but like I figure I gotta go on and just like give you like a chance to give yourself up if you if you choose so. So we have it where like Helsing and Hyde are squaring off here, and so Helsing, of course, is to have this this device, this little spinning device that we kind of see here with these blades in his hand there. So Helsing is to go on and lob off one of Hyde's arms, and Helsing is trying to like scramble and figure out how he can take out Hyde. It seems that Hyde is going smack into this bell, and he's like, the noise. And so we have it at one point where Hyde is to break off this bell and is to shove it to where now Helsing is like hidden in this bell. Helsing is to go on and drill a hole into the ground, and when Hyde is to kind of pick up this bell, thinking that, oh, like Helsing just dropped down. Instead, Helsing is still in the bell, and he goes on to try to further go on and fight Hyde, which leads them to the rooftop of this church. And so Helsing is, and while this is happening, they end up having to break this like very like long-lasting piece of glass within this church for some goofy reason. I'm like, sure, that's so vitally important because the cardinal will bring it up later. So we have Hyde, who is tempted to chuck Helsing off this church so he will fall to his death. And so Helsing is to be flung off this roof, and Helsing is to have this grappling gun and shoots it, and it's to now fire into Helsing into his chest, or Hyde into his chest. A bunch of H's here. So Helsing is to go on and figure out a way to use Hyde's weight as a way to just be able to not fall to his death, but kind of swing to smack against this building so he can be okay. And so Helsing is now running on to trying to get back to Hyde here. And so what ends up happening is that Helsing is to go on and figure out a way to take Hyde and have him fall, to where, of course, he is to go on and fall to his death. And while Hyde is to go on and change into or who is to change to Dr. Jekyll while he's falling, Dr. Jekyll is to fall to his death. A number of people in town are to notice now that we have Jekyll dead, and they're looking on as Van Helsing is to possibly be the murderer of this man. So like, Helsing, how could you? Because we go on and we find out that Helsing is to have wanted posters all over Paris. He is to rip one of them off and like, hey, this, I guess, could look like me. So we turn around and have Helsing. It's like, well, job well done. Like, it was either alive or dead, and dead is always an option. So Helsing goes on and is to make his way back to the Vatican, to this church, to talk to this cardinal, and we have Helsing who's like, "Bless me, Father, because I have sinned." This cardinal's like, "Yeah, you've sinned. You've sinned quite a lot." So the cardinal, Jeanette, is just upset that Helsing was to go on and break this $600 thing of glass, and that or 600-year-old like thing of glass, and it's like, you should go to hell for what you did. And Helsing's like, well, bring it on, because it would be a reprieve for me doing this. Like, having Helsing for a week go into hell is a reprieve. So Helsing is to go on and ask the cardinal, it's like, well, hey, like, why is it that you guys aren't trying to like stop all these wanted posters, and why aren't you guys trying to help me? And the cardinal is just like, well, that's because you're not very discreet, and like you're like killing so many people, and also because like we don't want to go on and say that we exist to help you out. So Helsing is like, well, you know what? If you guys don't exist, then I don't exist. So I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to leave. So the cardinal is to lock down this kind of door to keep Helsing from getting out. And so the cardinal's like, well, hey, like, I remember when you were a young lad and you stumbled upon us and we kept you. And here's the thing, like, technically what this guy is saying doesn't exactly make sense, because supposedly we have Helsing who seems to be with the Cardinals like as if he's kind of lived a very long life, and that he's lived for like hundreds upon hundreds of years. And so like what this guy is saying doesn't exactly add up, but I guess it just is what it is. So Helsing goes off to get gadgets from a friar named Carl. And so Carl is to go on and is to showcase like this silver stake that is to kind of pop out, and is to have a showcasing of this big machine gun like item, where Helsing's like, hey, I want to get one of those. And he's like, yeah. So we have Carl, who is to give Helsing this crossbow that has like multiple different like speed crossbows coming out of it. And Helsing's like, okay, all right, like I can deal with this. So Carl is to go on and ask Helsing if he is to go on and get any like memories of his past. And he's like, well, I get little like things here and there, like I get like dreams about me being in Rome, and like and other kind of things, but I don't know what to think about it. And he's like, oh, okay. So Carl is giving a tour, and he has this thing called the nitroglycerin, and he has this dot, and he chucks it, and bomb goes off, and he's like, oh, I'm sorry everybody. So showcasing that at some point they're going to use this. And I think Carl at one point is to like have this bomb, but he doesn't know what it is. He's like, I don't know what this is, but we'll probably use it somehow. So, and then in the later part of the movie, Carl's like, oh, I figured out what this is. And so they find out that it's some like sunlight bomb, where like all the vampires end up getting killed off all at once. So we have Helsing, who is telling Carl here that he is going to have to go on with Helsing to protect him. And like this friar cannot go on and disagree with Helsing. So he's like, wait a minute, I've never been out in the field. And it's like, well, too bad. Like, you're coming with me. Like, you're gonna protect me. So friar's like, okay. So because we of course have Carl relay to Helsing or there's kind of a relay to Helsing that there's this new threat going on called Dracula, and he of course is to meet up with the Valerius family, who is to have a tradition of trying to take down Dracula and is to have consistently failed, and Anne and Velkin are the only two left of this family, and then their family will eventually be wiped out. So Helsing is trying to even the odds against Dracula. So it's like, oh, okay, this sounds fun. This sounds reasonable. So so we go on. We have Helsing and we have Carl, who are making their way to Transylvania. So while they're making their way to Transylvania, we of course have Anna and Velkin, who are trying to face off against the werewolf. So we have it to where Velkin is to kind of be the bait for this monster to want to go on and just be like, here, kitty kitty kind of thing. So we have Velkin, who is to be out there just kind of being a man-witch. And so the werewolf is to spot Velkin, is to, of course, start to go after him. Velkin is to have this kind of rope thing that is to be a thing that he is to grab, so he can just kind of be at this high post where this werewolf can't get to him. Velkin was to accidentally drop his silver bullet gun, and so now to Anna and any of the number of people that are all to just be shooting away at this werewolf without having a lick of silver bullets, besides Anna, who is to say, let's get Velkin's gun because he has the silver bullet gun. It's like, yeah, wouldn't that have been the first thing to do? Jesus. Like, either that or you guys could have gotten a bunch of, like, silver swords and could have just continued to just be, like, chucking them at him. If you don't have any actual silver bullets, you could have at least done that. Kind of slowed the werewolf down, maybe. So, that could be a strategy. So, Anna is going on, and so they end up tripping up this trap that is to have this werewolf like fall into this hole, and then this hole is to have this like this cage slash netting slash cloth thing that is to wrap this werewolf up. And by the time that Anna is to go after Velkin's gun, all of a sudden the cage thing is to be broken to have the werewolf try to go after Anna. Anna's telling everybody to run, so everybody's running like crazy. Velkin is trying to run after Anna to protect her because it's like, hey, like we have to try to defend the line of course, Valerius's, and so Anna is to, of course, spawn out another Valerius, so we might as well try to save her. So Velkin, while trying to protect Anna, is to suffer the fate of going against this werewolf, and we have it where Velkin and the werewolf are to seemingly fall to their death, fall into this water, and like, hey, we don't know what happened with these two, but we find out Velkin later is to be a werewolf, because story would make sense. We have to have a more important werewolf to really tie into the story here, so great. So we now have Helsing, who is to make it to Transylvania, and it seems that a number of people in this town are just like, well, hey, who are you? And everybody is just at an unease with Helsing being there. They don't really know who he is, till he used to go in and say, like, hey guys, I'm Van Helsing. And Carl is like, is every town just like this? And Helsing's like, pretty much. So after Helsing is to go on and talk to the number of people in this town, all of a sudden Anna's to show up and be like, oh, like, you're Helsing, like, the stories precede you. And so Anna's to go on and introduce who she is, and so all of a sudden now we have, this is daylight, and we have a number of Dracula's princesses because considering Anna is the only Valerius family member left out of this line, because at some point, considering Velkin is possibly dead or is probably going to be under the control of Dracula while being a werewolf, we have Anna, who is to be the last Valerius, so like he is going to do whatever he needs to go after Anna, and that is to send these princesses out during daytime. Daytime, yes, but it seems like there's some fog going on, or it doesn't seem that the sun is out all that well. So Helsing, of course, is to be caught off guard by these princesses who are flying in as these bat slash women. So Helsing is to be scrambling to get his weaponry. He's scrambling to get his crossbow, and he's just pelting these things with these crossbows, and he barely hits any of them. And Helsing is telling Carl, it's like, hey, it's not working. And Carl's like, well, that's because you need to shoot him in the heart. Do you not know how to kill vampires, buddy? So Helsing goes on, and he is to pour holy water into his bow, or into his arrows, and we have Helsing scrambling to this holy water because they knock one of his cantina of holy water out of him, so he's getting to the church to get to this holy water. So now it's a chase after that. So Helsing is to go on and take down one of these princesses, as Anna is to be grabbed and is to be like flown, and Anna is to stab into the girl that is kind of flying her around, and so she drops on this roof. Anna is to make into this house where all of a sudden both Valeria and Verona are to go on and just kind of meet up with Anna. And I guess Anna is to know Illyria because I guess maybe they were like cousins or family members, and so it was just kind of a catch-up moment. So Valeria and Verona are, of course, wanting to go on and kill Anna here, and Illyria is like, well, I'm going to get the first bite. So Anna is to go on and figure out a way to defend herself, to then scramble out of there. And the two princesses are to flee, as we realize that Helsing and Anna are to be even matched with these princesses, so they run off. So we have Dracula that is to realize that he's like, well, hey, like, I guess since I don't have a Frankenstein here, I'm going to go on and I'm going to use this werewolf as this like test to see if a werewolf will work just as well to resurrect my children. And when also the girls are to come back to mention that they are to fail and one of the girls are to die, we have Dracula's like, well, I don't care. Like, oh well. I'm like, well, how do you not have emotion for her death? And he's like I feel nothing. It's not my fault. So and so we have it where, of course, the other girls are to go on and talk about emotion and stuff like that, but Dracula's like, so we have that going on where Igor is torturing the werewolf because it's in his nature. So, or that's just what he does. So now Anna and Helsing are making back to Anna's place that I guess was her family's. And Anna's mentioning to Helsing about some painting that her father used to stare at for hours. trying to figure out how to get to Dracula. And Helsing's like, okay, like they're whatever this means. So Helsing and Anna, like Anna's starting to gear up to go after Dracula. She's getting all this gear and all these things, and Helsing is to go on and try to stop Anna, and he ends up kind of knocking her out with this gas, and Anna is to fall asleep to wake up to when she starts roaming around her home. She is to bump into Velkin, who is trying to go on and tell Anna Dracula's possible plans, but then all of a sudden Velkin is to turn back into the werewolf and is to go back with Dracula to do what his plan is. So we have Helsing that is to somehow or another figure out this whole painting thing, and he is to go on and figure out that there is a piece missing from this scripture. And so Helsing is to go on and just be like, okay, well, like by the word of God, open this door. And so we go on and have this be a mirror, and Helsing and Anna, or Helsing and Anna and Carl and whatever, to walk through it eventually. I think this actually happens in the later part of the film, but I'm just kind of mentioning it now, just kind of get it over with. But so Helsing is to go on and is to make it to Castle Dracula, and Anna is scrambling to want to help her brother, so eventually she makes it to the castle. So the friar is to stay back with the village people. So Dracula is to go on and have the werewolf go and make all these children be resurrected. And so Helsing is to go into the castle and want to see what he's up against. He's kind of like just chucking pieces from out of this egg to see what this monster is. And so once he finally sees what it is, he's like, oh, okay, like, all right. So all these eggs are to start to hatch and go after the town, but it seems that with the werewolf being weak, it just seems there's a weaker variation of these monsters, and so all of the like little small bat creatures all die off, and the princesses are to just go back to the castle, realizing that they failed. So we had the friar who is to save the bartender, like the villager of this town, and she was like, oh, like how whatever can I do to thank you? And the friar's like, well, do you want to sleep together? And she's like, well, like, I thought you were a monk, I thought you didn't do that. And he's like, oh no, I'm a friar, we can do that. So Carl goes on and sleeps with this woman, and is to all of a sudden uncover this this hidden painting that he is to read off, and all of a sudden this painting is to be like a werewolf going up against a vampire. And he's like, oh man, this is scary. And he falls over and he falls back, having this couch that they're on kind of fall over. So we have it, of course, where now that Dracula is to realize that the werewolf will not work, they now have to go on and come up and try to find out where Frankenstein's monster possibly is, or how to make one. So we have, of course, where Anna and Helsing are to be at this castle, and so they're finding, or they're trying to figure out also where Frankenstein's monster is. So this leads them to a an underground cave of sorts where the Frankenstein's monster is. So Helsing and Anna go on to find Frankenstein's monster and is to talk to him. And so, like, Helsing starts describing that he's like an 8.5, 9 foot tall guy. He has copper teeth. And Anna's like, well, that's a really good description. How do you know that so well? And he's like, because he's right behind you. So Helsing and Anna start finding Frankenstein, but realize that this guy has no evil in him. And Helsing is to tell Anna that. And so Helsing is to ask Frankenstein, it's like, well, hey, like, if you'll, like, help me, like, do what needs to be done, like, so they use Frankenstein's monster as a baiting device to have him, like, horse and carried out. And Anna's to say, it's like, well, hey, like, we have the fastest Transylvanian horses, and so they go on and they horse and buggy this, and it seems that there are two different horse and buggies. One is to be a trap for one of the princesses to fall to her death with, and once we have Helsing that gets back with Anna and the other horse and buggy, we find that the werewolf is to make his way onto this horse and buggy, and the top of the horse and buggy is now on fire. So we have, of course, where both Helsing and the werewolf are to kind of be wrestling with one another. They fall off the horse and buggy, and we have it where Velkin is to die, he's to be killed, but sadly enough, Helsing was to get kind of clawed. So, realizing that Helsing will be the next werewolf. Anna is to mourn for her brother's loss. Boo-hoo, he is to die. Sad part of the story. But then we turn around and Anna is to be taken, and so now Helsing has to go on and bargain with Alira, and Alira is to mention to Helsing that's like, well, hey, like, we'll trade the monster for Anna. And Helsing's like, oh, okay, I'll make that deal. Where do you want me to go on and like do this exchange? Hopefully in a public place. We've Alira that is mentioning about a masquerade ball, and that'll be a very public place. Come to find out, Helsing is to not realize at first that every single one of the people in this masquerade ball are all vampires. So they couldn't have. They kind of would have. They should have figured that this was going to be some kind of trap, right? But they had to go along with it. So Helsing and Carl are to be these masquerade-ish characters making their way to this ball. So we have Dracula that is dancing along with Anna, and we have her being showcased in this mirror where she's the only one there and everybody else is all vampires. So Anna's to mention that Dracula doesn't have a heart, and Dracula's like, well, maybe it just needs rekindling, and maybe you can be the one to do that. Because Dracula is going to go on and try to make this girl one of his princesses because there's very few left. So Dracula is to be tempted to suck the blood of Anna. While that's going on, we of course have Carl, who is to see this guy who is to blow like fire out of his mouth. and that seems like a weird thing. Someone is to have alcohol and shoot fire into a fire. It's a whole like circus trick. So Carl is distracting this guy to blow fire onto Dracula, and Dracula's trying to grab that guy and want to just kill him. So Dracula's on fire. Helsing is to grab Anna, try to get the heck out of there, scramble out of there. And so while that's happening, we go on and we have Igor, who is to find Frankenstein's monster regardless. And so like now like we're back to square one basically. So we have it where Anna and Helsing are to realize that when they meet up with Carl, after Carl is to figure out this bomb and is to kill a number of vampires, and both Anna, Helsing, and Carl all escape. Helsing is to talk to Carl, and Carl is to mention that the Vatican and whoever Helsing is working with wants the Frankenstein monster dead, because the Frankenstein monster, like, he may be a all well and good person, but like there is still a danger with what this guy could eventually bring to the world. So like one way or another, like somebody could figure out how to reanimate people by just looking at Frankenstein. So like there's too much of a risk there. And Helsing is telling Carl, it's like, well, did you tell them that I was a werewolf? Did you tell them that this Frankenstein is not a threat? And Carl is like, no, I left all that out. So Helsing is now ticked, and he, of course, is to be holding up Carl, wanting to kill him, and he's like, oh, I'm sorry, like it was the werewolf in me. Just write it all off as just it's the werewolf in him. So now we have it where like we have the Frankenstein's monster back at Castle Dracula, and we had Dracula that was also to tell like Helsing that his first name is actually Gabriel. And so he's like, Gabriel. Like, we have a long history, you and I, Gabriel. Isn't it great, Gabriel, for us? Yeah. So, like, you've been alive for hundreds and hundreds of years, Gabriel. And I'm like, okay. So now we have to have this grand master plan. And so the grand master plan is for them to just kind of thwart what's going on in the castle. They go through the mirror to then try to get to quickly to the castle. They make their way to the castle, and so it seems that we have it where Anna and Carl are going to have to go on and find the werewolf antidote, because I guess there's conveniently a werewolf antidote in this castle, because you got to have some side quests going on. So Anna and Carl are to find this werewolf antidote, and it's inside this like acid glass. So while they're doing that, all of a sudden Valera is going on and trying to take down Anna, and we have Anna that goes on and is to knock this thing down, take the antidote, or have Carl take the antidote. And so Anna is to chuck this acid at Alira and also this door so they can get the heck out of there. Alira is to heal up, and so Anna and both Carl are scrambling out of there. So come to find out, now they have to go on to try to make it back to uh, where Helsing is, and so they have to weirdly use like all these ropes and like the bridge is out, and like Alira is kind of chasing after them. So Anna is to go on and finally kill Alira, and Anna goes on and is to say, it's like, you know what, like, here's a little tip. Instead of going on and like talking about how you're going to kill somebody, just kill them. Like, don't drag it all out. So Anna kills Valerian is to give her that tip, and then she dies. And so Carl is to chuck the anti-werewolf serum to Anna, who's on this rope, and she luckily catches it, and then she flies her way to get to Helsing. Helsing is to get into the castle, where Frankenstein is to go into this machine and start putting together a bunch of these little tiny little bat monsters for Dracula. So Helsing is to go inside there, just kind of going on and kind of waiting for midnight. So Helsing starts to go on and realizes that one dong has happened upon the clock, and so Helsing is to start turning into this werewolf, and Dracula's like, oh my god, like, this can't be. So now Helsing and Dracula are fighting it out, and Dracula is trying to convince Helsing, like, hey, like, don't go on and do this. Like, hey, we can be like brothers in arms, and like we could be working together. And Helsing's like, no, yeah, not so much. So we have it at one point where Helsing is to bite into Dracula's neck and is to go on and kill Dracula off here. And then Helsing is to turn around and try to get to Frankenstein's monster to unlatch him from the kind of the thing that he's tied up to. So Helsing is to realize that it seems that the straps are going to be very difficult to take off, and it might hurt Frankenstein. And he's like, well, like I think I'll be fine. And Helsing's like, well, yeah, like going on, like, pain's a normal part of life, right? So Helsing is to all of a sudden unstrap Frankenstein. Frankenstein is to try to get off this machine. And so at one point, I think Frankenstein almost like falls off, or is to just be dangling onto this building. So, but eventually Frankenstein's okay. It's all good. So we turn around and have Helsing, who is to turn back into this werewolf, and he is to see Anna, and the werewolf can't be controlled. And so accidentally we have Helsing as this werewolf who is to kill Anna, and Anna is to stab the werewolf with the anti-werewolf serum. And Carl is thinking like, oh, like, well, I guess I can't stop Helsing from being this werewolf, so now I have to take this spike to him. And Helsing is to stop Carl because he is to get the serum inside of him. And so Helsing is to realize what he had done, and he had killed Anna, and so he starts crying. He's like, ah, no. And so now we, of course, have it where Helsing is to bury Anna, And as he's to bury her, all of a sudden he sees like a cloud in the sky, and it's Anna's face, and she's going to heaven, and like Helsing is to realize that he's like, well, you know what, like I think what's done is done, and with Frankenstein's monster is just gonna go off on his own. Like we've taken down everybody that we can take down, so like that's it. That's a wrap. So with that said, I think I've covered most of this movie at the end of the day. There may be some details where I didn't quite exactly go into. Like when Igor is to turn on both Carl and Anna to get to the anti-werewolf serum, and Helsing was to intimidate Igor to take them to this anti-serum, and if he even like gives a hint about Igor not being trustworthy, to just start lobbing things off the guy. And so I guess by the end of this, we have Igor and the minions who all kind of get taken care of. Happy ending had by all. So I think with that said, I'm going to happy end myself out of here. Goodbye, everybody. Goodbye, everybody. Hopefully I've covered this as best as I could. Yeah, so I'm going to get out of here. Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.